Without further ado, I am delighted to introduce Tori Telfer to discuss Confident Women with us. Confident Women is a thoroughly entertaining, and I completely co-sign this, and darkly humorous roundup of history's most notorious but often forgotten female con artists and their bold, outrageous scams. Tori also wrote Lady Killers, which was about female serial killers. This book is so fabulous. If you read the article in the Westerly Sun, you probably saw that I was quoted saying that I have to cut myself off from reading because I'm just having so much fun reading it. The stories are engrossing and exciting, and just buy a copy of the book. It's so great, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat. So a little bit more about our panelists today. Tori Telfer is a writer and podcaster living in New York City, and her writing has appeared in numerous publications such as The Atlantic, Rolling Stone, Smithsonian, Vice, etc. She has written a screenplay. She has written, produced 3 different podcasts, such as Criminal Broads, Red Flags, and Why Women Kill. Her first book, Lady Killers, was published in 2017, and it was called A Thrilling Character Study of the Most Diabolically Complex, Fascinating Female Psychopaths in History. And Confident Women just came out last month, and you just heard me extol its virtues. And here today to talk with Tori is fellow podcaster Rebekah Sebastian. And she is the creator and host of an interview format podcast called Die-alogue, a true crime conversation. Rebekah's love of true crime began at a young age when she watched Cops with her dad. Her fascination with crime and passion for criminal justice continued for years, and she now channels all of that energy into her true crime trivia show and weekly podcast, where she interviews important voices in the true crime space about important themes around the genre, such as trauma, race, abuse, and justice. Okay, so enough from me. Tori and Rebekah are going to talk for about 25-30 minutes, and then we'll take your audience questions submitted through the Q&A. All right, take it away, ladies. I can't wait to hear you guys talk about the book.
Hi, Rebekah.
Hi, Tori. Thank you, Anastasia. So good to be here today talking to you about what we love to talk about.
Our favorite subject.
Our favorite subject, that's right. And it's not our first time talking. So but we never run out of things. We're always looking for more ways we can do this. So glad everyone's joining us today. And Anastasia's right. The book is so captivating. And I thought a good way to start might be the way you frame Confident Women. You've kind of categorized female con artists under these 4 broad categories, underneath which there are even more sort of granular descriptions. But maybe could you lay out how you see these 4 archetypes of women con artists?
Absolutely. I'm going to look at my own copy of the book to make sure I remember.
Oh, good. Then I won't feel as bad.
Yes, no, don't feel bad at all. So my editor was the one who was like, what would you think about categorizing them by category? And I was like, can I make up my own categories? If so, yes. So these are the Tori Telfer archetypes. They're not like, academic archetypes or anything like that. But the first section is called the Glitterati. So these are women who are obsessed with wealth, obsessed with looking wealthy, not just obsessed with becoming rich, but obsessed with convincing people that they are rich, which is a handy way to pull off a con. The next section is the Seers. So these are women who do crimes that involve the spiritual. So there's the spiritualists, who are kind of like a famous, it's sort of an established religion today. And then you have fortune tellers, and it's a murky category because these things are not illegal, but these women use them to illegal ends.
Yes.
So then the third category I've called the fabulists. And these are women who tell stories like in a compulsive way. Like they might constantly be reinventing themselves, or they might maintain a narrative for their whole life, or they might, all con artists tell stories and pretend to be who they aren't. But I felt like these women specifically, there was something about the way they clung to stories that was worthy of categorizing them that way.
Yeah. I'm wondering if people are having people pop into mind. I'm just keep going, but interesting as you're describing, I'm thinking of different people.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'd love to know. there's a subcategory of those called the tragedians, and these are women who use real life tragedies to con. So this is a popular con. So it's someone who might say that their house was destroyed in Hurricane Katrina and won't you help them? There's a 9/11 faker in this book. She says she was there in the South Tower on 9/11 and she wasn't.
Yes,
And
I
then,
remember her.
yeah, so that's kind of like, those are the most hated women in the book.
Yeah.
And then the last category is the drifters. So these are women who literally roam a lot, like all across the US. There's a lot of getaway cars in this chapter. There's a lot of movement. There are a lot of aliases. These women are just like, if you're trying to pin them down, like they're not going to show up for coffee. Let's just, they're like your flakiest friend.
Not your most reliable.
No, they're probably going to be in Kansas when you thought you were meeting them in Brooklyn for coffee.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the broader framework. And within that, there's so much room. And even as you're talking, I'm wondering, have you ever seen one of your subjects kind of hover between two categories?
Yes.
I'm thinking of a woman in the news right now, actually, that the audience might be aware of. Anna Delvey really came into notoriety for being a major con woman, scam artist. Now, is she hovering between two, would you say?
Yeah, she could be a member of the Glitterati because she obviously loves wealth. But you could put her in the Fabulists because she tells a compelling story. And I think even to this day, she doesn't quite admit like that she was lying about who her parents are.
Right, right. Well, so speaking of her, since, this is timely to when we're talking and your book, she just, she served time. So sometimes women who are doing this do get in trouble and have to pay their debt. So she just was recently released. So I was just curious, what do you think in terms of her story of, because I guess to get parole and to get out, she did have to eventually show remorse. What is your take on her statement to the parole board, which was, she actually is very sorry for the damage she caused, which was very different from the story she was telling defiantly when she went in?
Oh, I don't think she's remorseful. She's done interviews since getting out saying that she doesn't think she's committed a crime. So no, I don't think she's remorseful at all. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram.
Yeah, of course.
She annoys me so much, but I do have a grudging admiration for her because I think she is very smart and she is sort of good at branding herself.
Yeah.
But she simultaneously bugs me because she's always posting like sexy selfies from like really ritzy hotel rooms with like rap music playing defiant lyrics. I'm just like, Anna, calm down.
Yeah. Well, she's not shying away from what's happened either. And I think that's a smart strategy to come out and kind of own it, right? And to just she's making it part of the continued evolution of Anna Delvey, right?
I guarantee I am just waiting for her first sponsorship deal, like some edgy like sneaker brand or some, Soho, the new Soho house, whatever. Like they're gonna have her as their spokeswoman unless there's some legal thing in place which would prevent her from doing that. But I'm not sure. So
she got money for the Netflix deal, and apparently she used a lot of it, a couple $100,000, to pay restitution to her victims. So I wonder if she's precluded from future financial compensation. I don't know.
Yeah, if she's paid restitution, I don't think so, but I'm not totally up on my Son of Sam.
Yeah, exactly. It is the Son of Sam law, exactly. And it might be different for financial crimes and violent crimes. Well, there's another con woman in the news before we get to the con women in your book. And I'm curious where you would categorize Ms. Elizabeth Holmes.
Ooh.
Because to me, she defies, I can't quite easily place her, whereas other people, you can kind of see where they might fall. So I'm curious where you might put her. And then also wondering if you and everybody heard the latest news in her trial, which is being postponed due to some news. I was wondering if you've heard.
Yes. So I would, if I had to put her in one of my categories, I would put her in the Fabulists because she certainly told a compelling story and convinced a lot of people of it and even maybe believed it herself.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a fabulous story in the like that meaning of fabulous as like not realistic. Not like Kim Kardashian fabulous, but like, you know,
like fabricated.
Fabulous. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I would maybe put her there, but she really is. What's striking about her is she is similar to a lot of male con artists who, like the story of being an inventor and the proximity to the medical world. There are more male con artists who do that, which I think is like simply because for gendered reasons, like we're more willing to believe that a man has invented something or that is a doctor. But that's what makes Elizabeth Holmes striking to me. So I would maybe need to invent a category for her.
Yeah, well, I think wasn't the one of either the book or the documentary about her, I think was called The Inventor. So yeah, so she warrants her own invented category. That's really interesting that you bring up this idea of gender, because it was one of my questions I wanted to ask you. We're moving, into an age where we don't want to engender behavior as much as we used to. However, do you see differences? You've extensively studied women who are con artists. But you probably have studied, cons and scams in general. Is there a difference between the way men and women scam people?
Yes. And the funny thing about con artists is they do not care about what society thinks is like the way to be. Like they are not woke, they don't, and they're not feminists. Like they're really not. They're out for themselves. So I am sure we're going to see con artists who are using like woke Instagram feminism to forward their goals. Like there are con artists today who use like Instagram wellness culture, so whatever's in the culture, they'll use it, but they're using it for themselves. So I see the women in my book often using these very almost stereotypical gender norms or aesthetics. They don't care. They're using it on purpose because they know it'll convince you more, so it's funny to me. I feel like sometimes because my book is about women, there's a tendency for people to be like, look at this like feminist, like this book of feminists. And it's like,
no, this is not a book of women supporting women. This is a book of women exploiting women.
Right. So that is like how I see gender playing into them. So they do tend to use more sob stories, more feminine things, pretending to be a mother or a grieving someone who lost a lover, or I don't know, like a frail older lady. They will use these things because I think they know that society is more convinced by them, rather than a woman coming in and being like, I'm a doctor.
Right.
Not that women can't be doctors, duh. But I think society, there's still a little bit of a like, are you really a doctor? Are you really an astronaut?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But what again is so kind of interesting about Elizabeth Holmes are two things, is that she sort of didn't have a lot of this like medical acumen to back anything up. So she sort of relied on like her charm, I guess you would say, though that word is even debatable. But and also that she's pregnant right now. So it's even more an engendered conversation, because now she's leveraging this pregnancy to postpone her trial, which is not a right, I don't think, among the arrested and the inmates waiting trial. I'm pretty sure that's like something you get with a very hefty legal defense.
Right.
But anyway, very, very interesting. Something you and I have talked about at length on our podcasts, on stage together when we used to be able to meet in person, is cults, women in cults. And I was rereading your book and thinking, I'm getting cult vibes. I get cult leader and con artist. I feel like if it's a spectrum, maybe they hover around each other. And I was curious if you see that, and if so, how?
I love that. Yes. I mean, maybe a con artist is like a micro cult leader who
I like
one at a time usually,
right.
Whereas a cult leader is like 700 at a time.
Right.
But yeah, I think especially for the spiritualists to use religion or spirituality to con, obviously that is something all cults seem to use.
Yes.
I know we wanted to talk a little bit about Rose Marks today, who is Yeah, she's still alive. She was a fortune teller. She's currently in a federal penitentiary in Illinois. And she did have some cult leader vibes in that she wove a very compelling web that from the outside looked ridiculous.
Right.
Like she would tell her victims, she would take thousands, even millions of dollars from her victims. And when they asked for their money back, she'd literally be like, A, like, I don't know where it is. B, Michael the Archangel has it. C, it burned in the 9/11 fire. It's so weird that there are two 9/11 cons in my book.
I know.
But apparently it's kind of a thing. So she would give these answers and then she would ask you for more money, and maybe not just money. She would, like, to one of her clients / victims, she was like, the spirits want you to bring me a vacuum cleaner because she wanted a vacuum cleaner.
And other like useful, tangible items like maternity clothes or specific sneakers, like for her family.
Shoes. Right. Like it was shameless. And so to you and I, or to the judge and to her defense lawyer, this looked ridiculous. Like it kind of looked like, okay, these victims are stupid people, basically.
Yes.
And that was said about them. And you see that in how people write about cults, right?
Exactly.
Like, how could you have followed Jim Jones, that meth addicted, sunglass wearing maniac, to South America? But as we know, like, an event, cult leaders, it's very convincing when you're in the web.
It's very convincing, and they are very strategic in what they tell their intended target, right? So Jim Jones had a great message before he lost his mind. I mean, he was preaching radical desegregation and unifying Blacks and whites in the church, like a great message until it changed. And Rose Marks was speaking to the deep sadness that her clients were feeling and ways to improve it. So of course they were sort of positioned to believe her because they were so desperate for the truth and the healing that she was promising. Yeah. So it is easy to write them off as stupid or gullible, but they're in probably their most vulnerable moments when you start giving, and you don't start with that big amount, right? In the beginning, Rose was very smart, asking for items, right? She built this trust with these customers who would come in and ask for a bracelet or a watch that she would give back, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like that's like a mind play for sure, right?
Yeah. She and her daughters and daughters-in-law who worked for her were very good at identifying. They wouldn't con everyone who walked through their door. They did plenty of palm readings, tarot card, whatever, $50 type services. But if they found someone who was particularly vulnerable, and I'm sure they just had a sixth sense for this type of person, and been doing this for decades, then they would start the long con, which would involve asking for something valuable, like a bracelet, like maybe like your grandma's bracelet, which they would take to prey on and then give back. And so then there's trust established. It's like, oh, she didn't take my bracelet, she didn't run off with my diamond ring,
right
like she's legit. And then they would say this, they would tell you you're cursed and that they can fix it. And then they would give you this like compelling bit of info, which is, this is all free. Like the work I'm about to do for you is free because God put me here on this earth to do this work. Maybe I'll keep some for, a small fee for my services, but you're going to get all the money back. But like, I need $7,000 today, but you're going to get it back. Which again is like, if you're happy and you're not involved in a cult-like situation at the moment and you're listening to this, it's like $7,000.
No way.
There are very few people in the world I would just give $7,000 to. But they knew how to identify the people who were in the state of mind, which we could all be in.
Yes. That's so important to acknowledge.
Right. So, and then the con would start. And then I think there was also this, I always forget what this sunk cost fallacy, which is like, it's the kind of thing like, your friend who's been dating the wrong guy for 10 years and she's in it so long that she won't break up with him.
Yeah.
I have a friend that's exactly like this. Because it's like, that's called sunk cost fallacy. Like it's this feeling like it's better to just stick it out rather than lose all that.
That's accrued over that time. Yes.
even though it's better to break up at 10 years than to break up at 15 years.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think Rosemark's victims got in a real sunk cost fallacy type of mindset because they've given her $7,000 and then $15,000 and then 30.
Right.
And so it's like, I mean, I keep saying the web, but it really was like getting tangled and tighter and tighter in this spider web.
And the amounts grew and grew. I mean, she was making a ton of money. And, you know, the specific customer that you highlight in the story was an author. I mean, she had a lot of money and she got sucked in for years and lost everything. And the stories got crazier and crazier. Yeah. Can we talk about the Brad Pitt
we can
element to the story, and that like he emailed the customer?
Sadly, Brad Pitt did not I didn't get to do an interview with him.
Yeah, that is spoiler alert. We're sorry if we misled. We're not trying to con you guys into thinking Brad Pitt has something directly to do with the book.
And Brad Pitt's coming on the Zoom. No, I actually didn't think about
Zoom bomb
him for an interview. I should have. So the Rosemark's biggest client was Jude Devereaux, who some of you may have read her books. Super successful romance novelist, New York Times bestseller, made a ton of money. But was really sad because, you know, it doesn't, just because you have a ton of money in 3 houses doesn't mean you can't get depressed. And she had a lot in her personal life that was wrong, including really wanting to get out of this emotionally abusive marriage and wanting a kid and not being able to get pregnant and being in love with someone else. So she comes to Rosemark's in this state, and Rosemark's, of course, tells her exactly what she wants to hear, which is like, I can get you this peaceful divorce. I'll get you a kid. It's all going to be perfect. Rosemark's hires a private investigator to look into Jude Devereaux's life, which then enables Rosemark's to seem psychic, because she'll be like, your husband's coming by between 4 and 5 today to drop off divorce papers, and it would happen. So, I mean,
the sorry, but that's brilliant. Like, unbeknownst to the client, that you're supposed to be the psychic intuit for. You're using their money to pay someone to give you the intel. I mean, it is like a very smart plan.
Yeah.
Until it falls apart. Go on.
Right. I mean, this was not her first rodeo.
No.
Rosemark's, like, she knew. So it gets very sad. I mean, Jude Devereaux started paying her $1 million a year for her services. And Rose basically drained her finances while keeping her on the hook with promises. And a lot of things didn't come true, like this peaceful divorce didn't come true. Her husband got everything in the divorce. Rosemark's was like, it's okay that he's getting everything because he's going to die soon. He didn't die soon. Sorry to chuckle, but it's like, whoops. Like, she signed a horrific divorce agreement because she was like, he's gonna die and
this won't matter. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
She like is losing her money, but then she does end up getting pregnant and having a son, which I think is, I mean, that's huge because that's what Rose promised her.
Right.
8 years later, her little boy dies in a accident. Yeah, nothing to do with Rosemark's, but a tragic accident. He gets hit by a car, and so now Jude's vulnerable again, like more vulnerable than she's ever been before. And Rose is there. She arranges the funeral. She sells the house, keeps the profits, brings Jude Devereaux down to Florida to be near her. And here's where she starts spinning like the truly insane, what do I call them? The narrative just gets more insane. And there, she starts to feed Jude Devereaux this reincarnation narrative where she's like, I saved an embryo from your IVF. You're going to die and be reincarnated into the body of a virgin who is then going to bear this child, which is going to be your son's biological brother. And also you're going to marry Brad Pitt.
I mean, that's like a silver lining if there could be one.
Brad Pitt was like the minor detail. And Jude Devereaux buys into this, and like, if you're sitting here right now judging her, just remember she was shattered. Like,
absolutely.
she was not herself. And Rose was saying like, you can't stop the work now because your son's soul is going to get thrown into hell because your husband's dealing with some black magic. I mean, nonsense, but she had her little tricks for making it seem true. Rose had her daughter-in-law walk along the beach with a little boy like in the distance, and she was like, "That's you in the future." Very theatrical.
I mean, detail oriented. She's like very, she's
she had Brad Pitt
has visuals and email addresses and
a Yahoo email address for Brad Pitt.
Right.
It was like legend99@yahoo.com, which I literally can't handle. And so anyway, who knows how long this would have gone on, but by that time a detective was looking into Rose Marks, and he literally knocked on Jude Devereaux's motel door where she was basically waiting to die and be rejuvenated. And he was like, "This woman is a scammer." And Jude was like, "No, that's impossible. I know her. I've been with her for 17 years. I've given her $17 million. There's no way."
$17 million.
And the detective said, the vision you had, the reincarnated you on the beach, that's her daughter-in-law. And it was just that little realistic detail that snapped her out of the fog. And she said, "It was like somebody hit me with a hammer. I realized it was all a scam."
And they flipped her. So she ends up kind of being part of the sting operation to take her down.
She does phone calls with Rose. I
mean, it's really, despite the fun details, it's really, really sad and tragic. And Anastasia was mentioning, and I concur, that the book's tone is so enjoyable. Like, it's very hard to put down. Each story is so different, though there's these through lines that they're like building on each other. But it's very real that there's destruction being done by these scammers. But there's also this flip side. You've also studied serial killers and written your first book on lady serial killers. So how did you kind of, for the book, establish the tone that could be a little lighter, if you will, than murder, which it is? White collar crime is kind of like a breath of fresh air when you're in this dark true crime space, but not discount the absolute wreckage that they cause. So how did you, because I think the tone comes across beautifully, but how did you think about that?
How did I think about it? I don't know if I had a specific technique, but that's a really good one. I'm glad you think the tone comes across well. I guess to me, for all these true crime stories, like, it's funny until it's not. And it's okay if something's ridiculous. It's okay to point that out. I mean, I was going to say, unless it involves like the death of someone, but like there is nothing ridiculous about death and murder. So it wouldn't, but Brad Pitt's fake email address is funny. And like, let's not clutch our pearls and pretend that it's not.
Exactly.
So I'm going to give you that detail, but I'm also going to tell you that Jude Devereaux was suicidal and lost her son. And I'm going to like really try to paint that scene of when she lost him so that you'll remember how sad it was. So I guess I just try to focus on the details that fit the tone of the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you tell the truth of it. I mean, it's also, truth is stranger than fiction. So you're really just a reporter of what happened. And but it is your writing style that I think gives the reader a nice break from the trauma that a lot of these people probably caused when we get to kind of indulge in some of the more lighthearted details. It's a nice balance. It's nice for the reader to have that, I think.
Thank you. I also just feel like these women are wild. Like, they're characters.
They are.
And should we pretend that they're just like, the whole thing is like super somber? Like, they're so out of control. Like, they're wearing furs and diamonds and driving in pink cars, and it doesn't. Go ahead.
What do you think, speaking of all the lavish items that often go with the scam artist's lifestyle? Not always, because sometimes they're after something different, but is there a common motivator that you see among all of them, or does it differ based on who and what they're doing? It's the driving theme.
I think if there is a common one, it's not money, although it looks like that. And don't get me wrong, they like money. They all like money. We all like money. It's not like, the motivator is probably more similar to serial killers than we'd like to admit, which is kind of like a power, like controlling the narrative, like a compulsive need to control and to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking even for our famous male con artist like Bernie Madoff, that's a very money scheme, right? It's all about
Sure.
money. But and I don't know a lot about him, so someone correct me if I'm wrong. At the end of the day, was he really doing it to get another pool, or was he kind of like psychopathic and liked the thrill and maybe couldn't stop? You know, I would.
What he could get away with.
Right, exactly.
At some
So
point,
it's the latter.
right. No, I think you're getting at something. And because some of the women in your book are looking more for an accolade and for something about their identity or some completion of themselves or their role in something more than financial means. I mean, the woman who lied about being at 9/11 didn't profit from it.
She didn't get
which
it
almost makes it more puzzling. Like you could imagine someone utilizing a tragedy
for money, but
for money, that happens. That's a common scam, but she didn't.
Yeah. And there's a quote, let me see if I can find it really quickly. There's a quote that a psychologist says about how, so this woman, Tanya Head, 9/11 scammer. There have actually been kind of a lot of 9/11 scammers.
Right.
And I have a quote in here from a psychologist who mentions that she has like a weird amount of clients who've claimed some connection to 9/11. And she says something like, where is it? But basically she says like that there's like they sense like a power in the proximity to something so historical and major and tragic.
Right.
So it's that. So I think that's what drives Tanya Head, this specific scammer, but I think it's what drives a lot of scammers too, is like they sense the power in the story that they're going to tell, or the power in the kind of attention that they're about to get from us.
Yes.
And there's something very alluring in that. But I think we can all probably relate to that. You know, I always
say, go ahead.
Well, like we all like tell little lies and polish up things about our past, and we all just do a little bit of a like mini scam.
Right. I was going to say, I think there's a seed of this almost everyone could probably point to if they're super honest, like something big happened to your hometown. You might mention that was your high school. And maybe it happened like not in your class, but maybe it was your sister's cousin's neighbor. But do you know what I mean? We make ourselves a little closer to the narrative than we are.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You talk a little bit about how it affected you, how you felt about it.
Right.
We all do.
Yes. And I think that's like I think it's very adolescent behavior. And I'm not saying it ends in adulthood, but when a tragedy happens in a high school, like sometimes you want to kind of be like, I'm really sad about this student that I didn't know at all, who something happened to them, something befell them. But like, some people more than others are like mourning publicly, right? It's like that unleashed, like this to the nth degree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's very
did we find that psychologist quote? Probably not.
Oh, dude, I gave up.
I know. How could you find one? I actually have a quote here that I could read if you want to keep looking for that one. But I thought this was a great description of con artists. This is early in the book. It's in your introduction, but you're talking about most people, especially women, live their lives rattling around inside 1,001 social barriers. But through some mysterious alchemy of talent and criminality, the con artist bursts through those barriers like Houdini, escaping from one of his famous suspended straitjackets. The con artist doesn't feel the need to use the correct social security number or keep the name her parents gave her or put her real eye color on her driver's license. She doesn't mind forgery. She's not afraid of a little bigamy. She'll drive a fancy car right off the parking lot or steal a necklace made of 647 diamonds, and she doesn't care who pays for the price for her crimes. And though people love to turn her into a metaphor for entrepreneurship, for capitalist grift, for the American dream, for America itself, for the devil, or simply for the average woman's life of mild duplicity, she doesn't give a damn about your figures of speech. The only person she answers to is herself. Isn't it shocking, that sort of naked selfishness? And doesn't it sound sort of delicious? Like that really gets to, I think, the enticing nature of these stories is they're just like unapologetic.
Yeah, like Anna Delvey on Instagram.
She doesn't care. Yeah.
It's like, I'm drinking champagne in a hotel room, like suckers.
Right. And Elizabeth Holmes isn't probably boo-hooing the plight of other women in her situation awaiting trial who are also pregnant, who are not going to have their trial delayed. Like, not her problem.
Not her problem. Yeah.
So yeah, so in that way, maybe that is like a faux feminist standpoint in terms of the con artists themselves, like that they are unapologetic.
No,
about their
exactly. They're feminists for themselves.
yes.
They're certainly not intersectional in any way. Like they don't. They're
It's
like
not, it's not me too. It's me, only me. Hashtag only me. Just
yes,
me.
exactly. Hashtag only me.
It's the compendium. Okay, good. We've figured it out. We've cracked their code.
I found the quote. If you want.
Good. Please share.
So this is from a psychiatrist who didn't actually know the scammer in my book.
Okay.
She said about 9/11, she said, "No other event has inspired so many false claims among my patients. People of all stripes and socioeconomic classes seem to sense the power lurking behind that type of attention, that kind of historic relevancy."
Oof.
So to me, that quote was like, oh yeah, that explains. Like that explains why Tanya Head did what she did. She sensed the power lurking. And again, it's like, God forbid you are a 9/11 survivor. Like most con artist people would never wish that fate on anyone. The real survivors were and are extremely traumatized, you can imagine. But it's back to that hashtag only me narrative. It's like, I don't care about all the PTSD that these guys are enduring. Like, I think it sounds kind of cool to be able to walk around freaking everyone out about how I was on the 76th floor when the plane came through the window. I mean, her story was so ridiculous. Like
it was, I think you've said this before when we talked about it once. It was as dramatic a story as could happen on 9/11. She told that.
She made herself as close to the literal plane as possible.
Right.
But somehow still live. I mean, it's like so eye-rolling.
Implausible.
It worked well.
Something that just struck me is a trait among these women and men who do it has to be a lack of fear of consequence. Or they're not highly risk adverse. Whereas like someone like me, like I can see the seedling of like wanting something like that, but I am so afraid of it all falling out beneath me. Also, I don't think I'm at my core deceptive, though. I mean, I have my moments, but like I'd be so afraid of it unraveling and being found out and being humiliated and ashamed, like even not for a benevolent reason, just because I don't want to look stupid. But they've got to really push that aside to plow through with their plans, right?
Yeah, push it aside, or maybe aren't even born with it. I mean, I think I'm the same as you, Rebekah. Like I still cringe about this time where I like benignly crashed a party. It was like a fancy little gathering and someone was like, "Do you have an invitation?"
They said what?
They were like, "Do you have an invitation?"
Oh my gosh, you were like, to get honest.
Cringing now. This happened years ago. Like I could never be a con artist, not because I'm such a good person, but because I couldn't even it still makes me want to die thinking about that. So you're right.
Absolutely.
In the passage you read, that's sort of what I was trying to get at. Like, don't we kind of wish that we didn't have that risk avert? Like, doesn't it sound kind of cool or freeing to be able to be like, of course I have an invitation. You don't know me? Whatever.
Well, you've got the wrong list. Like that kind of boldness.
Yeah, it sounds kind of thrilling to us, right? Who could never do it.
I don't go to parties where I'm on a list very often, that kind of party. But even if I were on the list, I'd still doubt it. Even if they were making a genuine mistake, I'd be like, I probably not. I don't deserve to be here. Goodbye. Yeah, we're not going to be good con artists story, I don't think.
No. We know our place as the tellers of these stories.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or anti-heroes.
And you know, Rose Marks too, not only was she not risk adverse, she was a gambler. Like that was an interesting part of her story too. She had this gambling addiction. So maybe that was part of the thrill for her too, to play.
I think so. Yeah, to get close to the edge. And I mean, I think the similarity between gambling and her con is actually pretty striking. She was like gambling that she wouldn't get in trouble with the law basically for decades. She was gambling that none of her clients would break and go to the law.
Or ask for their money back.
Or ask for their money back. And if they
Which
did,
she
had
said,
she
had a story. Yeah.
She had her story, or sometimes she had a lawyer who would give them a little bit of money and make them sign like an NDA kind of agreement. That was like, I have never been punched by Rosemarks. So she was a gambler in many ways.
Speaking of red flags.
I know.
It just sounds stressful to me. It sounds like I don't think I could sleep. I can't. I have enough like undue anxiety. Don't need to add that. Well, I want to make sure if people have questions that they have the opportunity to ask. So I'm going to let Anastasia field those, or let us know if people do. If they don't, we'll just keep chatting.
So I do have a question, and I do just want to call out, Rachel in the chat just wanted to say hi to both of you guys. And so I see Tori answered it. So that's perfect. But we'd love to hear a little bit about what the research process of putting together this book was, and maybe like what the most surprising or like exciting piece of information is, and tell us a little bit about that journey and the excitement of that.
Sure. So the book spans from I shouldn't say literally Marie Antoinette's Paris to today, and from Canada to Beijing and back again. So it was a different process for each chapter because it depended on the era. Was I working in English or another language? So I did a bunch of different things. I mean, my old faithful is newspaper archives. That's always where I start. That's always where I end. It's like old journalism. What were people saying when this woman was caught, But for something like the woman who was captured in 2008 in Beijing, I worked with a translator because there was hardly anything in English. Like even now, if you Google her name, you probably won't be able to find a photo of her, or, there's like one article. Anyway, so I worked with a translator on that. I worked with, there was a woman from the 70s in St. Louis. So that's not that long ago, but it's still long enough ago. So I got some documents from the St. Louis Police Department, like her arrest sheet. And then she went up to Buffalo, New York. So I worked with a librarian from a university up there who got me archives from these little Buffalo newspapers that I didn't have access to through my newspaper subscription sites. So that kind of thing is really fun for me. I mean, even just getting this woman, her name's Roxy Ann Rice. If you're out there, contact me. Like, she could still be alive. I just could never find out what happened to her. But getting her rap sheet, so to speak, was like thrilling because it was like, ooh, there's her date of birth. Like, there's her eye color. There's her, like, every little detail. It was just, every little detail was interesting to me. Like, oh, that's the time she got arrested. I didn't necessarily include it in the chapter, but it was like she was wearing blue. She was wearing a blue skirt when she was arrested, which I don't think I ended up including, but I find that kind of thing really fun. And so like Roxy, and then the pink getaway car woman who I've briefly mentioned, Margaret Lydia Burton, were the chapters that I most uncovered myself. I think there wasn't anything else about them since the time of their arrest. So those were fun because that was just a lot of digging around in newspaper archives and some stuff on ancestry.com, finding immigration records and birth certificates and doing a little bit of piecing together, which sometimes I don't get to do if I'm writing about a woman who has been written about before. I'm not necessarily scanning like the record where she came over on the ship and seeing like, ooh, it says that her mother was unemployed, but she was employed and she was over 18. So I feel like she was the breadwinner of the family then since her dad was dead. Anyway, it makes me feel like Sherlock Holmes.
That was a fun little window into your brain, Tori. I liked that.
That was super fun. I was a history major in college, so I totally get the thrill of research and finding those little kernels of information. And was there anyone who you researched that didn't make the cut for the book?
Yes.
Like honorable mentions?
Dishonorable mentions.
Yes.
There were 2 women whose cases are sort of still unfolding. There's a fake psychiatrist from the UK by way of New Zealand, by way of Iran, or whatever, the reverse, who is, I really wanted to include because we've talked about how most of the fake doctors of history are men. So I was like, ooh, but her case was still being like, things were coming out when I was writing. So I didn't want to commit to a story and then have it be proven false. There's a fake wellness blogger, what's her name? Belle Gibson from Australia. Maybe you've heard of, Rebecca's heard of her.
Yeah, I hope you'll do something with her on the podcast.
Yeah, maybe a podcast, because I mean, the girl had like, you would think her story is over because she owes a ton of money and she's been found guilty, but it's not. Like, things are still happening with her. And then on a more sobering note, there was a woman that I was thinking about including whose con was just honestly too horrible and too recent. I mean, it's like when it's really horrible and really recent, that there's a specific ick there that I tend to shy away from. And she had conned this whole family and convinced 2 members to kill themselves because she scared them so much about, she was like, you've given away my privileged medical information and you're facing decades in prison. And so that's terrible. And she passed away in jail. And I was like, it was so different from everything else in my book that it seemed maybe I should include it, because at first I was like, this is a good reminder that cons are serious. Like, this is because we all chuckle and laugh about them. I mean, I do it. Rebecca and I do it. Like, we all do it. But it seemed like maybe I should put this in to remind people just how high the stakes can get. But ultimately, their family members are still alive, and it just didn't feel right. So I'm very okay with my decision not to include it, but just FYI, that con does exist.
Yeah, that's I think it's a really valid point and logic, particularly when, you guys talked quite a bit about Anna Delvey, and her story is so salacious and so glittery. So, and you read, there was that, I can't remember what publication you might, that really expansive profile on her, I think when she just got arrested, and it was just like, it was like reading Gossip Girl.
Yeah, the cuts are the New York Magazine.
I think it was the cut.
I think it was the cut. Yeah, that sounds right. That article was just
fun.
So,
yeah.
It's important to remember that there is a toll.
Yeah. It's easy to think of it as a victimless crime when it isn't a homicide.
Right.
Because that's so tangible. We connect a victim to a murder. And so I think it's like an expansion of our definition of crime and victims when we're talking about cults and cons.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is all we have for questions. So I don't know if you guys have anything that you didn't get to touch upon that you wanted to just sort of round out the event with. But before I let you guys sort of have the last word to wrap up what has been truly a fabulous afternoon, I have been sitting, with my camera off on the other side of the screen here, just like laughing, being like, oh my God, I have to go back and read this chapter. I loved the chapter about the Chinese woman Wang Ti in Beijing. I thought that chapter was so great. Well, they're all great, but so on that note, to our audience, pick up your own copy of Confident Women. I'm going to drop the links in the chat again. It's so great. You will not regret it. And I think it's going to be one of those books that once you finish it cover to cover, you'll still pull it off the shelf. And, you'll read one of the vignettes here and there, just when you need to pick me up about how crazy the world can be. So I'm going to drop links in the chat, and I will let Tori and Rebecca just close it out, whatever you guys want to.
I think we should direct people to our podcasts.
I was going to say we should tell them about the business we're launching that they can get in on today. Just kidding.
But only today. TikTok.
PayPal links. Yeah, Tori, why don't you, maybe I'll introduce your podcast and you introduce mine so it's not as weird. Tori is the host of the wonderful podcast Criminal Broads. And we mentioned her first book, Lady Killers, and this is Confident Women. Women in true crime is pretty much Tori's brand, which is why I love her so much and why we always have so much to talk about. But Criminal Broads focuses on a woman. It could be a perpetrator. She could be a fighter of justice. She could be a victim of a crime, but a different woman every week throughout history, some are current, and they go back, and it's just her beautiful storytelling, so engaging. And if you love her written work, you'll love her podcasts, and vice versa. If you start with her podcast, you're going to want to read her book. So Criminal Broads is her current show, and then she has 2 past shows called Red Flags, which is great. She has a co-host on that one, and Why Women Kill prior to that. So a repertoire of options.
Thank you. And Rebekah's podcast, her first podcast is called Die-alogue. That's DIE-alogue. It's a true crime conversation, and I've been on it twice, and it's very fun. So basically, if you're into true crime, but you're always kind of thinking like, I want to talk more about the why, I'm a little bit unsatisfied with us just talking about Charles Manson over and over again. She interviews everyone in true crime, from detectives to fellow podcast hosts to writers to survivors, to people who think their dad was the Black Dahlia killer.
Maybe he was. We don't know.
He was.
You should listen.
Yeah, so check it out. And then she has a new podcast called Criminality, which is about crimes and reality TV. And I guessed what it was, sort of, on my last interview with Rebekah on Die-alogue. She mentioned researching a crime. We were talking about translators, and she was like, I'm researching a crime in Paris. And I was like, Kim Kardashian's.
I mean, who says Paris and research and knows that I was doing that jewelry heist? That was incredible.
Give me another hint.
No, I don't think I did. Amazing.
So Criminality and Die-alogue, if you need more podcasts in your life.
Thanks, Tori.
You do.
Yeah, we've both been on each other's podcasts. This is what we do. We just have these conversations.
Yeah, you've been on Criminal Broads. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, it's what
Circle
we do.
of life. And thank you everyone for being here and listening. And especially thanks to Anastasia and Bank Square.
This was so awesome. I had such a great time talking with you guys and getting to listen to you talk this afternoon. So thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to join us. And thank you to our audience for doing the same. Virtual events, we still have to have the people, and we're glad you're here with us. So hopefully by the time the next book comes out, or maybe a updated edition with our friends Anna Delvey and Elizabeth Holmes sometime in the future, we'll be able to see you in person.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.